Hi, my name is Baron Henley, and I am going to take you through an analysis of how documents are drafted in law firms and show you some superior ways of handling that particular task. First of all, we need to talk about how documents are drafted and the methods that law firms and legal departments use. The most common drafting method is what we call find and fix. If I need to draft another revocable trust, I find an old one I previously drafted and I make changes to it. And while that's better than starting from a blank page, because you're using at least something you've previously built, it has lots of problems. And the first problem is that it relies on memory, most often not the lawyer's memory. So we have lots of clients, law firms that the lawyers actually don't know how those documents come together. They write down notes and they send the notes to a support staff person, and the support staff person is the one that really cobbles together the document from pieces and parts of other documents. And if that support staff person doesn't show up that day, that lawyer really can't do any document generation. And even if it does rely on the lawyer's memory, it's still easy to forget. You know I did a special needs trust for some client at some point, and I don't remember the client's name. So there's still a problem there. It's really easy to forget to add something to the document that should have been included, but which was not in the original starting point document. So errors of omission, easy to make. Easy to leave something in that shouldn't be. And that's just as easy as an error of omission. I personally had a very unpleasant experience of an error of inclusion when I first began practicing law, when I drafted a will for my wife's boss, which is the worst one to make a mistake with. But I left something in a will that had nothing to do with him and referred to 4 children from a prior marriage that he wasn't even previously married. But I read it, I didn't catch it. It wasn't a heading that was titled. It was in the miscellaneous provisions. And 20 years later, I am still embarrassed by it. But that was an error of inclusion that caused me a lot of anguish. Do you know this? If you do a search and replace, it just doesn't catch everything. It misses things. The word isn't spelled wrong. It's just the wrong word. And I read documents like this all the time that are chock full of these kind of mistakes. And finally, this is the worst part of it. Let's take something like real estate. I did a lot of real estate work when I was in private practice, and we represented a lot of people that own strip malls. So we were constantly doing leases for new tenants, prospective tenants, that were going to lease spaces in strip malls. So we'd draft the first document, the first draft, we'd send it to the tenant, and not surprisingly, the tenant was represented by counsel. And they would take a look at our lease that protected the landlord and oppressed the tenant, and they would go, wait, and they would, we'd begin a negotiation. The lease we ended up signing was always a compromise. Never once in my entire time of doing that did the tenant, represented by counsel, accept the lease as we drafted it and say, that looks great, let's sign it. So the problem that creates is when I use that lease again, I know there have been compromises made in that lease, and unless you have a photographic memory, you're not likely to have remembered all of the changes that you made. And although we know that, we start with that document anyway and hope that we can find all of those changes that we made. And all, if you take away nothing else from this seminar, it is the fact that you cannot continue to do that. You can't stay there, because you are going to continue to go slowly. You're going to continue making mistakes in your documents, and sometimes, many times, they're just not found by you or anybody until that document maybe comes into litigation years down the road, and then you discover these typographical errors that can cost you dearly and cause you a malpractice claim. So the point here is you've got to take the next step up from using old documents to create new ones. And the next step up is this. We call this the gold standard document. And what I'm trying to do here is I am putting together an instrument that has every option that could occur in the order that it could occur, appreciating the fact that in many cases there's no way for all these paragraphs to ever be in the same document at the same time, correctly anyway. And then I'm also taking the additional step of identifying changeable text. So this is an example, a very simple first paragraph of a will or second paragraph of a will that is going to look different based on the different fact patterns that one might encounter. So gold standards, but forms, model documents, and templates. And I'm going to circle back around to this concept and talk about the rules for creating gold standard documents, which are not all intuitively obvious. The next step up from that would be to take your gold standard and add some level of automation. And the word processor, both Word and WordPerfect, have some basic ability to do this. So let me give you an example of that. In this document, if I go to this first drop-down, this is just Microsoft Word, by the way, and I pick that this is a retirement agreement, I'm going to hit the Tab key on my keyboard, and if you watch this word and this word, you'll see, actually, let's make it a resignation. You can see how it switched to resignation and separation. If I switch this to transition and hit Tab, it switches to transition. So you can do some basic wordsmithing, conditional logic, but I'll tell you, and as you'll see, it is really unpleasant to do this in a word processor, and the tools are fairly limited. But in any event, let's say I made this between Sarah Smith, Tab, this one prefix will get all of the prefixes. So I'm just hitting the Tab key. This one pronoun will get all the pronouns. As Vice President, effective 9/1/2014, and she was a faculty member, and she had 14 hours of vacation, and that document is now done. So everywhere, you know, Mrs. Smith signing this agreement is not admission by Mrs. Smith, any kind of, so all the pronouns will be right, herself, her heirs. The fact that this is a retirement agreement and not one of those other kinds is all right. So it's a faster way of cranking out the initial document, but it's still, it's a matter of starting with a gold standard. You can't go to this stage unless you first establish a gold standard. So all we did in this case was, and to give you an idea, let me close that and go back and open it again. I'm going to turn on I'm going to hit a speed key, actually, that strict editing and stopped, right? I'm going to hit a speed key that reveals all the fields in this. So as you can see, everything that's got a bracket around it is a field in Word that you couldn't otherwise see, but there's things that change based on how I answered those 7 questions. And you can see a lot of changeable text is going on here. And this, frankly, is really, it's a manual process to create even the level of automation that's here. And there are a lot of things you just can't do. Like I can change a word, but I can't make a whole paragraph appear or disappear by using these things. And the reality is you can go into Word and you can click the little help button and you can look for how to do this and you will never find the answer. It's just not accessible. And you're going to have to either read a really fantastic 1,000-page aftermarket manual to learn how to do this, or find a class on it, and I suspect you wouldn't be able to find a class on it either. So while this is present within the word processor, it's largely inaccessible to users. And you know, we've been helping law firms and legal departments with technology for 17 years, and I have yet to encounter a firm already doing this. They're usually surprised that this is even possible. So that is forms plus word processor automation. Again, my starting point was the gold standard. From there, I can go here. Kind of a lateral move is to take, if you have a matter management program in a law firm or any other kind of a database, if you're not a lawyer, but let's say you've got Outlook, you might be able to pull client data or any data that you want out of Outlook or a matter management program and into your documents. So if you're a lawyer, matter management programs all have document assembly built in. It's not typically very fancy, but at least I can fill in the blanks. So that is something that if you have a matter management program that maybe you aren't taking advantage of, that you could be taking advantage of. Next, also kind of a lateral move, is a commercial drafting system. So there are lots of these, depending on practice area, there are lots of these where you can go sign up for a particular form set, and they are automated. So Wealth Counsel, for example, does, among other things, estate planning documents. It uses a document assembly engine, specifically one called Hot Docs, which I'm going to talk about in just a second in greater detail. But you answer questions on the screen, and it generates incredibly sophisticated estate planning documents that work in all 50 states. So what are the good things about that? Well, you're going to generate documents a lot faster than you did before. You might generate documents you didn't even know about or couldn't successfully generate previously because you didn't have any experience with them, and now you can. And it's going to be really, really fast. The drawback, the big drawback, is that it's not your language. And if you already were in this practice area and you liked the language that you've always used, this can be frustrating because it isn't. And you have to learn to accept someone else's language. Now, of course, you could generate the documents and make changes to those documents, but then you're pretty quickly offsetting the speed gains you would otherwise have achieved by getting a commercial drafting system in the first place. Some of them can be customized, many cannot. And then kind of the pinnacle of efficiency is to take your documents, and instead of using someone else's, and automating them using a document assembly program. A document assembly program works, it's a tool. So the first thing that I think people don't always understand, they expect that if I buy this document assembly program that it's going to come with a bunch of forms that I can use, and it doesn't. It's kind of like a pneumatic nail gun would be to a carpenter. I can build something with it, but I'm going to have to go find the wood and the nails first, and it's not going to come with a framed out wall or something. And that's really what document assembly is. It's a tool that you can use to work with your own documents. So to give you an idea of what that looks like, I'll show you revocable trust using a program called Hot Docs I previously mentioned. So this is an example of a revocable trust from a firm, in this case in Michigan, that was tired of drafting their documents by finding old ones and making changes to it. That's exactly what they were doing. And so they said, look, we like our language. We don't want to use somebody else's language, but we want to do this in a more efficient way. We want to go faster, and we want to increase accuracy. So what they did was they automated their documents, and they basically, what Hot Docs allows you to do is take the questions that lawyers were asking themselves in the first place to draft these things and really make them appear on screen. So as you can see, I have, depending on, I have an unmarried man, an unmarried woman, or a married couple, and you can see that the questions are appearing and disappearing based on how I answer those questions. I hit next. What's your address? And over here you can see the entire structure of the interview. Some of these questions I've already answered so as not to bore you up by typing all this stuff. I can enter my kids. So, and here's another interesting thing about document assembly systems that are much better than fill in the blanks and anything that Word can do natively. You can gather lists, and almost every legal document has a list. You got parties, you've got grantors and grantees and mortgagors and mortgagees and buyers and sellers and et cetera, and you never know how many of each one of those you're going to have. Well, in this case, I can enter my 3 daughters, right? So I enter the first one. Now I enter the date of birth. The template knows that she's 19 years old and therefore not a minor and is not going to show up in the guardianship provisions, for example. If I said this is my wife's kid and not mine, you'll notice that I immediately get a checkbox to pull her back into my definition of children if I want. If it is both of our kids, then I could also disinherit her, take her out of the definition of children, put her in a special paragraph. And as long as I can enter, I only have 3 daughters, thankfully. I don't have any more. And if I had more, I would click Add Another, and every list is infinite, right? So that's another thing that's kind of, you just can't do that with a fill-in-the-blank thing in your word processor. It not only can I enter as many kids as I could possibly want, but it will know how many I have. It would do everything correct in the document based upon that. So it'll say Baron's children are A, B, and C instead of my child is, instead of Baron has no children. It would know all of that based upon what I entered or didn't enter into this list of children. So anything that you could infer or calculate based upon how a question is answered, the template can infer or calculate and not ask that question. That's a really important thing when you're trying to build an expert system that isn't going to require you know, a lot of unnecessary questions to be asked and answered. So in this case, I also have other relatives that are going to play roles in these documents, so I can enter them. And then finally, I get into the general trust information. So what this firm had was 9 different main kinds of trusts, and they're all combined into a single revocable trust template. So you can see if it's a restatement, I get a whole bunch of additional questions. If it's a new trust, I don't. And this is just phraseology this particular firm used. Do you want to include specific distributions, yes or no? Of course, that's an infinite list of specific distributions. Do you want to list the family members? Yes. Next. What do you want to do with a marital trust? Is it a qualified terminable interest property? Is it general power of appointment, or is it outright? And whatever you pick is going to completely change whole articles and the trajectory of the remainder of the interview. So I can go through and quickly fill in these blanks. Spouse, income, and principal. I want a limited power of appointment, 5 or 5 power. Each one of these things, of course, I'm going to go to my children equally. Yes, they got to be 21. I'm going to hold into a pot trust until they're age 22. Then we're going to hold into a trust after that. And each one of these things is massively changing, of course, the language that's going to come out at the end. So each question, they're only here if it controls language. So the wife is deemed to survive. Settlors is the trustee during settlor's life. Spouse will serve as the sole successor. And then let's say I want to do 3 levels of trustee. I'll do my spouse alone initially. Co-trustees after that are going to be mom and dad. So I'll pick dad, add another, mom. Done with that. Remaining trustees can serve alone. And then at the end, I'll pick my oldest daughter, Ariel, to be the last successor trustee. So instead of having to pick some kind of a modular approach to my initial and successor trustees, I literally can make it anything I want. I can have any number of trustees at any level. They could be individuals. They could be entities. I can really cook up the trustee succession map exactly how my client wants it. So I go through and I answer the remainder of these questions. Boom, boom. Answer the last question. Hit next. Distribution, we'll do 1/2, 1/2. Next. I've got a bunch of miscellaneous provisions that can come in or out depending. So I include or exclude the ones I want or don't want. Next. What do you know about the execution? I go to the end of the interview and I crank out a document. So it's now building out of hundreds of pages of optional text my sample document. Got a nice table of contents in here. And it is plain text as if I drafted the whole thing myself. So I can make any further changes I want. All the power of Microsoft Word is built in, so all the paragraph numbering is automatic, the table of contents is automatic, all the cross-references to other paragraphs, as you can see, these are all fields and therefore automatically update themselves. So I go back to my interview, shut down that interview, and what it's asking me here is, do you want to save the answers to the questions? And I would say, of course I do. And then when I'm ready to do something like my will, I don't have to answer any of those questions I already answered. So I just go in and use the same answer file. I'm the testator. It already knows my name. It already knows my address. It already knows all my kids. It already knows other people. So I say, these are all default answers. So I answer those questions. Tangible personal property, spouse, then children. Residue, I'm going to pour over to the trust it already knows about because I already answered those questions. Personal representative, same as the trustees. Guardianship, I'll just skip it to go fast. Execution, done. Here comes my will. And now I'll go back, and let's say my wife would have the same basic elections. Who's the testator? Wife. End of interview, go. Here comes my wife's will. So now it's a plain old Word document. I can make any further changes to that I need to, but you can get an idea of it's my language, my document, but I generated it as fast as I could answer the questions. So back to the slide deck. What's the starting point for this? Gold standard. In order to do this, you have to have a gold standard in the first place. So this is like the maximum efficiency one can gain of using your own documents. So the beauty of document assembly, Hot Docs at least, works with either Word or WordPerfect. You get to use your stuff. You simply answer the questions, and the software does the heavy lifting. And I think this is a really important topic that more and more lawyers are becoming cognizant of. We used to be rewarded for doing things more slowly. You know, we'd make more money. We were charging by the hour. If I did something slower, I made more. If I went faster, I made less. And that has really changed in the last 10 years at least. A couple of quotes from the American Bar Association. Lawyers are getting a lot of competition from do-it-yourself options, internet options, when it comes to drafting documents. This used to be something that only lawyers could do, and now that's not the case. Things like LegalZoom are out there pulling in $200 million a year from people that want to try to do it themselves. So, you know, to the extent you cost 10 times more than a DIY option for exactly the same document, then you're going to have to figure out a way to do this more efficiently. Attorneys who persist in preparing documents the way they always did will continue to find their business in decline. Another ABA quote on that subject. So, what do you got to do? Well, you at least got to start pulling together gold standards. And I wanted to walk through the rules for doing that because I don't think they're very intuitive. The first one is, and this is one that's not intuitive at all, one template per type of instrument. So in other words, the 9 revocable trusts that firm had, the prior firm, or 7 or however many it was, we did not create separate templates for each one of those trusts. We created one, and here's why. For 17 years, law firms and legal departments have been sending me piles of documents and saying, we want to automate this. And here's what I do. I say, well, why do you have 7 different trusts? And they say every time, oh, they're the same but for a fact pattern variation. For example, this is our joint trust and this is our single set law trust. This is our probate avoidance trust. This is our AB trust. This is our ABC trust, etc. I go, really? So they're the same but for? And they go, yeah, they're the same but for. And I start doing red lines. So if you send me 7 trusts, I will take version 1 and I will do a red line in Word against version 2. I will annotate the differences in a master document, and then I will compare version 1 against version 3, and I will annotate the differences in the master, and I will compare 1 against 4 and 1 against 5. I always go back to that original version, and not once in 17 years has there not been a ton of unintended differences between those documents. And the reason that there was always a ton of unintended differences is because it's never anybody's full-time job to make sure they were consistent. And therefore, they are not consistent. And let's take something in the realm of estate planning that a lot of estate planning lawyers are doing. They're adding provisions to the fiduciary powers to deal with digital assets. So, for example, if I die and my wife doesn't have the power as my executor and my trustee to get into all of my online accounts, because I don't get any mail at all. Every single thing I do is on the web. I pay bills on the web. Then my invoices arrive electronically. All of our investments are traceable to the web. And if you can't get into any of those accounts, you can't really be my fiduciary. And she needs the power to deal with all of those assets. So like even something as simple as my Facebook account. So what lawyers are doing is they're going back in and they're adding in specific powers to the executors or personal representatives and trustees to deal with digital assets, that, of course, is a boilerplate provision in the trustee powers or the fiduciary powers, which means that it has to show up in every single template they have. And it's not. The only way, in my experience, to make sure is to just have one. So if I have one will, I got one will to edit, one will to maintain, one will to update. I've got one revocable trust template, and I know that the fiduciary powers within that template are the only ones. You know, they're not in multiple places within the templates. It's one spot. There's only one template to worry about, and I've got one thing to update. And that's how you do it. So you're going to have to think about your documents a little bit differently, but if you want to do this right, you're going to pull them together into one. So every provision that could occur, changeable text identified, and optional text identified, and notice I say beginning and end. But what I mean there is you literally type in the document, if the marital trust is a Q-tip, start here, and then wherever that language ends, you need to say it ends here, because it might be obvious to you that that's where it ends, but it might not be obvious to somebody else using that same template. So you're going to compare versions using, you cannot do this visually. You have to use a program, either Word or WordPerfect, and run red lines between those versions of those documents to ascertain the differences between them. Then you simply compile those into one master document for each type of instrument. There's two ways really to do that, and these are terms that I think we kind of invented, so they're kind of goofy, chunk it out or blend it. But here's what this means. These two screens are showing you the same information. Chunk it out means show me the whole paragraph as it would look under this particular fact pattern. So the first A there is you have a single initial guardian. The second one is you have co-guardians, and if one of them is unable to serve, the other can serve alone. And the third one is you have co-guardians, but if one of them is not able to serve, they're not allowed to serve alone. The next set of guardians is going to step up. So I can show each individual paragraph like this, or I can blend them together like this. And you'll notice I've got my little annotations, and I just used the highlighter in Word, and I kind of blended them together. So the blended approach obviously occupies less vertical space and makes shorter templates overall. I don't know if they're easier to use or not, but I like to do it this way anyway. And if you ever plan to go and automate your documents later using either Word's built-in stuff or something like Hot Docs, then this is the way that you would want to approach it. So you literally have to pull apart your paragraphs and figure out what's the difference between these two paragraphs under these two fact patterns, and then annotate it that way. Here is another thing that you can do at the same time. Strip out the legalese and make documents that your clients can actually understand. There is a definite trend toward doing this, and many times all of that Latin and other BS legalese actually only serves to make it more ambiguous and more difficult to understand. I mean, I'm a lawyer, and I read documents all the time where I have to go and like pull apart a sentence to figure out what is modifying what and what it is actually saying, and it's really no point in that. And as a side note, I took a continuing legal education class a few months ago called Bulletproof Contract Drafting, which was delivered by a law professor. She's a law professor at a couple of different law schools in Atlanta, and she the instructor for this class. And it was like 6 hours of show me language, and then here's the original language that went into litigation. And she would ask, the class, how would you interpret this? And there was always, it was really easy to interpret it differently based on how it was worded. And then she would show the same paragraph or the same sentence or the same phrase cleaned up so that it was clear. And it was always like 1/2 of the words. And every time it actually was clearer and you could understand it. So a lot of that was, it was like example after example of legalese that actually served to make things more difficult to understand and less clear. So I would add headings. I would add tables of contents. I would try to come up with a more organized structure to it. Consider word rake. WordRake is a, let me find my browser here. WordRake is a add-on for WordRake.com. Here, I'll show this to you. This is WordRake, and what it does is it goes in and suggests ways that you could clean up your legal writing so that it is easier to read. So you got a 30-day free trial, and it's pretty inexpensive. If you $129 for an entire year, so pretty cheap. And that's another. In fact, some bar associations, like the Oklahoma Bar Association, WordRake is a member benefit that the members get. And a lot of law firms are considering going back and looking at their documents. Any lawyer that's ever sent, like if you do estate planning and you email documents, draft documents to a client, or you print and mail, U.S. mail them, and you call your client, a month later, and you say, "Did you ever read those documents?" They're like, "Yeah, I tried, but I read like 2 pages, and it just made my head hurt, and I just couldn't get through it." That's usually because it's written in language that only lawyers can make sense of, and there's just no point in doing that. So this is a great time to go in, think about, how do my documents look? How are they formatted? And it matters how your documents are formatted. It matters how they look, because that's what represents you out in the world. Your clients can't evaluate your work substantively because they didn't go to law school, but they do form opinions, and some of that is based on how it looks. And maybe that shouldn't be the case, but that is the case. Next rule for building templates is think about considering building also drafting guides with that. So you've got a gold standard, and in this case, this came from a firm that for years and years and years, this firm had these giant 3-ring binders of provisions that were all numbered like you see on the screen. And the lawyers had been using them for so long, they had memorized all the numbers without even trying. Like, oh, I need a 1.02, and I need a 3.02, and I need a 3.11, and that's how they drafted. So even though they eventually converted these into gold standards, the drafting guide, they still wanted to use the numbering system because so many of the lawyers knew that. So they would print this thing off, and they would go through and check off the boxes. You can also do something like this. This is from a firm in New Hampshire that obviously does family law. Again, the lawyers would print these things off. They would go through. They would check off the things, fill in the blanks. They can give this to someone. And what else does this do for you? Well, it's process documentation, and it's malpractice avoidance. Can you forget one of these questions that's right in your face? Well, not likely. It's not easy to. You'd have to skip over it. And it also ensures that if the document comes together in the same order as these items appear, whoever it is that's assembling the document is going to understand it better. And let's say you were a new associate at a firm like this, and they say, okay, Baron, you know nothing, new associate, I want you to draft this final decree. And if there was not, you'd be like, well, what do I start with, right? I mean, almost every lawyer lived through that. What do I start with? And they go, well, just find an old one. And that really doesn't help very much. Something like this, oh my God, I'd be so happy to have something like this, because this walks me through the process. What do I need to be thinking about? What information do I need to gather? And then if you combine this with a template, this is really powerful. And what did you spend to do this? Nothing. This is Microsoft Word, or Word Perfect, whatever you use. This is all word processing, foundational stuff. Next thing I want to do is make sure you understand the difference between regular documents and templates, because lawyers all the time tell me I use templates, and I go, let me see what you use, and they're not actually templates. A template, so let me give you an example of this. I'll save this out to my desktop. I'll just call this corporate doc. Okay, and now I'm going to save it as a template. Notice down here at the bottom, save as type. I'm not going to save it as a Word document. I'm saving it as a Word template. So I call it Corp Doc. I put it on my desktop. I hit Save. I close that. And let's go look at my desktop to see. Hopefully I got them out here. Corporate Doc here. So I got Corporate Doc, and then I've got Corporate Doc. See these two files? This is the plain old Word document, and this is the template. Even the icons look different. Now, so if I double-click the document, what happens? Well, you probably know. It's going to open up the document. Right up here it says Corporate Doc. So let me go back. What if I double-click the template? Does it open the template? No, it does not. Look what document it opened. Document 11, just the 11th new document that I've created today. So it doesn't open the template. So fundamentally, a template is different. Not only does it have a different suffix at the end, DOTX rather than DOCX, but it also behaves differently when you double-click it. It actually doesn't open the template. It doesn't give you the original template. It gives you a new document based upon the template. So when you use the word template, you got to realize that you're talking about a different file structure. It's a different animal. And so what firms would want to do is they would want to create templates for their documents, and they'd want those to be put into a public location on the server or someplace that other people can get to them. And then everyone can use that one set or that one bucket of templates to create new documents. And then there's only, again, one thing to update, one thing to worry about. So you can get pretty far down that road just by creating gold standards. Now, the next thing is you got your content pulled together. If your document is a pain to use, guess what? No one wants to use it. And the formatting matters, and the word processing that you're building into it matters. The word processing features that you build in or don't build in, those all matter. So this is actually a document a client sent me, and just to give you an idea what I'm talking about. See how this is way out here? If I come back here and I hit a delete key, it doesn't fix it, right? That's a formatting problem that's going to make this thing harder to use. If I go in and look at some of these paragraphs, I highlighted a couple of issues in here. Let me find a few of these. Okay. Let's say I wanted to add a new paragraph here. I want to add a new paragraph 7. So I hit enter, and what do you know? I get a 7. It's great. But I want spacing between the 6 and the 7, so I hit one more hard return, and then the numbering goes away. So I'm like, all right, well, I know how to trick this. So I'll go here, I'll get my 7, then I'll go back to the end of the paragraph again and hit another hard return, and then I'll backspace. See, I tricked it. Now I've got my 7 and the spacing that I wanted. So now I'm ready to hit the tab key on my keyboard in order to put in the title for this new paragraph I'm about to type. And I hit tab, and watch what happens. Did my cursor move over? No, it did not. And where did my 7 go? It became an A. These are the kind of things that drive people crazy. And if you pull together this great content and no one can edit it without wanting to break something, then no one will want to use it. Plain old word processing stuff. You got a table of contents. You look at this. Here is a typed cross-reference. So if I go in and I add anything above paragraph 3G, then this is going to be wrong. And because it was typed, I would have to look for, find, and manually update all of these cross-references. And as you can see, there's cross-references all over the place. This is just word processing stuff. But if you don't build the best of what the word processor can do into your documents, then they're just not usable. And you're never going to get to the finish line on this. So whether you do just plain word processor stuff or you take it this further step into document assembly, this is the playing field on which everything happens. And if you don't know how this works, you're never going to get there. So fundamentally, and just as an aside, we've been doing, all we do is legal technology, right? And there's no question what the worst problem is in legal technology. It is underutilization of what firms already own. The best bang for your technology buck is to learn how to use the stuff you bought instead of spending more money on new stuff. And sadly, most people have no idea how to use the word processor on a high end. They use it like a typewriter, and everything is manual that it could be doing for you, and that's really something to think about. You know, most legal users in particular will spend as much time formatting a complex document as they do actually creating the content in the first place. And almost no time should be spent actually wrestling with the formatting, and no time would have to be spent if the word processor were understood. So why is, aside from the obvious, why is this worth doing? Because that's the big objection. I'll hear people say, they're like, yeah, I get that I should do that. But when am I going to have time to do that? I barely have time to eat lunch. Well, I think there's reasons that you figure that out. The first one is, 80% of a law firm's and any businesses intellectual capital is stored in unstructured data like email and documents. And if you can't find those documents, then you can't find your intellectual capital. Pulling that stuff out and putting it into a document assembly system allows you to take advantage of what you have done in the past. It allows you to capture and reuse your intellectual capital, and ultimately, that's really, to me anyway, what knowledge management is. It's your ability to use what you've previously done and not have to recreate the wheel, and to share that with other people that you work with. When people are yelling at me about something that I owe them, it's almost always a document, and you probably feel the same way. This is a major stressor for most people, most professionals. There's always some document they got to finish, and as soon as they get that done, then people will leave them alone. But if it takes a long time to get that document done, then you just get yelled at and you get further behind. So it really is one of those things that if you think about what causes stress in your work life, probably getting documents done is a big one of those things. Paradigm shift. As I mentioned earlier, I used to make more money if it took me longer to do something, and that's not the case anymore. Law has predominantly switched over to more of a flat fee approach for transactional areas of law. Firms, in order to make the same profit that their predecessors did or they did earlier in their careers, now have to handle higher volume. There's competition coming from every quarter. The internet, do-it-yourself things. The clients who go out and shop around, they get on the internet, they know more about whatever their problem is than clients used to know because there's places for them to go to find that information. So another reason to think about doing this. Faster turnaround, lower costs. Happier clients got their service done quicker. If it takes you forever to get something turned around, I just actually spoke with a law firm today. They want to have a meeting because they're so frustrated because right now it takes them, they have a very large estate planning department, it takes them 6 weeks to get a document turned around, a set of documents turned around, right? 6 weeks. So that is just entirely too long and can certainly be fixed, but the first thing they're going to have to do is take a look at how they're using templates. I know lots of law firms and lots of lawyers that are subject matter experts who can't get their documents the last mile. They can't get the document in a form they could file with the court or that they could give to a client to sign. So this is also another problem for them. And they think, if I had some way of being able to get those documents cranked out by myself, I wouldn't be so dependent upon support staff. Maybe more likely I could do more work with the same number of people. So new employees. This is another thing that law firms tend not to hire new people until they literally are overwhelmed. Like they pass the pain threshold before they consider hiring new people, and then of course they hire the new people and they have no time to train them, and there's no time to there's no handoff. There's nothing for them to give them and say, okay, here's how we draft documents in our firm. Here's how you do this particular practice area. So that means that the firm just bleeds while these new associates try to figure out how to do their jobs. If you've got good templates built, all the power of the word processor can be built into those templates, and then the users of those templates don't necessarily have to know how it was built in the first place. They just know that it works. If I make changes, the document responds appropriately. If I add or delete something, everything updates like magic. And all they need to know is, like, here's how you update your table of contents, right? You right-click and you choose Update Field, and it's done. And those are the little things that a user needs to know. They don't need to know how it was all built in the first place. It all just works. So, better work product, higher accuracy, higher profitability, lower malpractice risk. Right? The only thing I'm entering is the answers to the questions. And if the template is right, the document is right. And so even on a turnaround time, a lot of times lawyers spend a lot of time reviewing documents. Once a level of trust has been built up in the templates that are being consistently used, then even that amount of time declines, where I don't have to read this section because I know it's going to be right, or I can get through it quicker because I know what to look for, I know the only things that could change, and I'm going to be done faster with that review process. So, the case for word processor automation. First of all, it's a great way to start looking at your own workflow and how you build those things, how the work gets done in your office. As I mentioned before, the best bang for your technology buck is to learn how to use the stuff that you already own. It's simple, right? No difficulty with maintaining something that's all in the word processor. You're familiar with that already. It's easy to edit. It doesn't require a lot of instruction. Easy to train people. It's all yours. Complete flexibility and control. Drawbacks, you got to update it. You're responsible for making sure that it's current. You're responsible for training. This doesn't happen as much as it used to. There used to be word processors would change formats and train wreck systems that people had built, and that's largely not happening anymore. But it's still a risk. And it's, as I mentioned before, it's difficult to do anything beyond simple fill-in-the-blank stuff if you don't use document assembly. The case for document assembly, these are a couple of actual examples. This was a firm in Los Angeles that hired a business process analyst to come in and look at all their departments and figure out what their effective hourly rate was. So one of the departments they looked at, they had an estate planning department of 7 lawyers and 1 support staff. So the lawyers were doing most of the work themselves. So they found out, and this is something that this very commonly is never tracked in a law firm. The lawyers track their time, but the support staff people don't track theirs, and they really didn't have any idea how long it was taking, start to finish, including the initial client meeting. It turns out it was taking 10 hours. And they were charging a flat fee of $2,000, which meant that their effective hourly rate was only $200 an hour, which was so unacceptable that they were considering just shutting down the department. So they decided to take those documents and automate them and stop doing them the old way, which is exactly what I described previously. They were taking old documents and making changes to them, and it took forever to get something knocked out. So they compressed it from 10 hours down to 1.5 hours, earning an effective hourly rate of $1,333 an hour. And just to be clear, there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. How long it takes somebody to do something often has no relationship whatsoever with the value that the client receives or perceives as a result of that service. The fact, like, let's say I wanted an estate plan and I go to a general practice lawyer that hardly ever does estate plans, and they go to the law library and spend 10 hours researching forms. And then in the alternative, and they charge me for the 10 hours, right? So let's say they charge me $200 an hour and I end up paying $2,000. In the alternative, I could go to a boutique estate planning firm that could have all my documents done by the time I drive away from the initial client meeting. Does that mean they're worth less? No, they're probably better. They're worth more. So just because they invested in automation and could get those documents done in a tiny fraction of the time that the other lawyer could, doesn't mean they're not worth the same amount of money, and maybe worth even more than that. So this is one of those things that this is how you leverage your time. Now, a lot of times people think of document assembly and they think, well, that's great if you've got some really complicated thing that, I can save 7.5 hours or 8.5 hours 4 or 5 times a week. But what about other things? Well, it turns out it's just as valuable for things that you do over and over again. So this is another example from an actual client, a firm in Detroit. They were frustrated with the fact that everybody, all the support staff people, generated similar correspondence differently, and it was taking on average, which doesn't sound like a big deal, it takes them about 8 minutes per letter. They actually tracked this. And you'd think, well, what's the big deal about that? Well, if you automated those letters, so they came up with a template that could produce any of 50 different kinds of letters, and they linked it to Outlook, so you could pull in the client's name, address, etc. with one click, and that saved them 5.8 hours per week. But interestingly, their engagement agreements all said, we charge $45 flat fee for all correspondence. Doesn't matter if it's a 5-page letter or a 1-page letter, it's $45. Well, if you can make $45 in 1 minute, that is $2,700 an hour on administrative time, not the lawyer's time, administrative time. Again, is there anything wrong with that? And the answer is no, there's not. They invested, and they just got a very rapid return on investment. Again, this is document assembly that they're using to do this. This is another good example of somebody using, I'm going to go back to a browser real quick and actually show you this particular website. All right, so this is a lawyer in Tampa, Florida, who decided that she was going to undercut the market and do it faster and better. So you click here to begin, and it's going to open up a PDF. You fill out the PDF, and all the way at the end, you hit submit, and it sends your answers to the questions back to her, and it is pulled together into a document assembly system using hot docs that she can then use to generate the documents very, very quickly. So she charges less, but she makes more because she proactively incorporated document assembly into her practice. And in addition to that, her clients love her because she's much faster than other similar firms. Her turnaround time is better, and she actually costs a little bit less. So that is an example of proactively using document assembly. Answer the questions correctly, your document's right. So your margin for error goes down significantly. You're not going to leave something in that shouldn't have been there. You're not going to forget to have added something that should have been there that wasn't in the first place. The template does all of that for you. You could allow your clients to engage in self-help. And this is a whole separate seminar, but I teach a seminar called The Online Delivery of Legal Services. And there are lots and lots of transactional areas of law which are making it possible, and this is just an example of that, burtonlaw.com, making it possible for clients to engage and obtain services from the firm without ever going and visiting a lawyer face-to-face. So how do you think this firm charges these flat fees for these various transactions without the risk that they'll take a bath because it took way longer to create those documents than they anticipated? Well, they are using document assembly, of course, to make sure that that doesn't happen. And this is just a way of packaging up legal services. And a lot of people look at this and say, this really just makes me ill. And I understand that. But ultimately, a law firm is a business, and you have to pay attention to business principles. And businesses that are successful create an environment in which it's easy to work with them. And what they're doing here is if you talk to the average consumer of legal services, they don't like the fact that you often don't know what something's going to cost before you engage. And that goes out the window here. I can see exactly what it's going to cost. I can see a preview. I can read a description. I get a little education. All these barriers to me hiring this firm are being torn down because they thought through this process. And then they protect themselves by incorporating document assembly into the generation of the documents. I like this as an example just because I know Brian Dees is a second name partner there. I went to law school with him, and he was obsessed with automation on day one. He used case management software before I even really was aware of what that was, and he went after document assembly with a vengeance. And so this is a firm that also uses hot docs. And you know, how do you have 22 lawyers and 275 total employees? You automate what you're doing. You systematize what you're doing. In his case, he has paralegals and legal support staff doing highly sophisticated work using a sophisticated system. And the lawyers really get to do, and this doesn't happen very often, they get to do what only lawyers can do all day. You know, they review documents, they go to court. All the administrative things are handled by all the rest of the employees. But in this case, document assembly makes a really big impact on their efficiency and profitability. So you get more powerful templates. It allows you to share data, and I showed you that on just a really basic level when I took the answers from a trust and dumped them into a will and didn't have to re-enter any of that stuff. So not only do I never answer the same question twice within a particular document, I don't answer the same question twice across a whole set of documents. And all the answers to that, let's say I did estate planning and probate, and I did an estate plan for somebody 25 years ago, and they've passed away, and now I'm going to generate probate documents for the estate of that individual. I could actually take the answers that I pumped into their estate plan however long ago and use them in the templates that generate the probate documents. I might have a general practice where I represent people in real estate and estate planning, and maybe I did an estate plan for them, and now they want me to put together a real estate contract because they're going to make a bid on a new house. I could use the client information from the answers provided in the estate plan and roll them right into the real estate contract template that I've also built. In addition, I can pull data out of things. So I can pull them out of case management programs, Outlook, and almost any other database as long as it's ODBC compliant and not otherwise locked down. The form consolidation I mentioned before, I cannot overstate how important that is. That is probably one of the biggest problems for firms that do sets of documents or that have, you know, transactional areas of practice. They end up with all these different starting points, and the starting points are simply not consistent. And pulling them all together into one allows consistency to be established, and really gives it, just as a complete aside, it's part of your business succession plan. We talk with lawyers all the time that want to take over another lawyer's practice, like so-and-so is getting close to retirement age, and they've asked me to join them with the hope of continuing their firm on once they retire. But there's got to be a knowledge transfer there, and if all that information is stored in somebody's head, then there's no way to easily transfer it. If you've got two lawyers in a firm, one is a real estate expert and one's an estate planning expert, and the real estate lawyer decides to leave and start his own firm, it's very likely that every single thing the estate planning lawyer knew about real estate walks out the door with the real estate lawyer. There's no leave behind. There's just a bunch of documents that that person can't reasonably find. There could have been a leave behind. There could have been a template. There could have been a document assembly system that allowed that estate planning lawyer to continue merrily drafting real estate documents, even though it's not that person's primary area of practice, if there was some system built in the first place. PDFs, I forgot to mention, can also be assembled. Not all document assembly programs can do that, but Hot Docs can for sure. So you could have one set of answers not only populate Word or WordPerfect documents, but also PDFs. There are web options as well. Many of the document assembly programs will allow you to make that whole interview process appear in a web browser, and once you answer the questions, then you get an opportunity to download the document so that wherever you are, using whatever device is connected to the internet, you can also engage in document assembly. So I think from a legal perspective, this is just one of those things where the cheese has moved, and we live in a different world today. And many other service industries that you're aware of have had to adapt to changes in technology and start using technology that maybe they didn't want to use. But after some point, it becomes necessary and required. And I think that taking a look at the way you draft your documents and sharpening the saw and pulling together your intellectual capital in some kind of a usable form is not really optional. And furthermore, if you think of it in terms of a spectrum of sophistication, speed, and accuracy, and profitability for that matter, you know, on one end of the spectrum is find old documents and create new ones from those documents. That is the slowest, most error-filled way to do that. And on the other end of the spectrum is you pull together the best of what your firm knows into a usable form, and probably halfway up that spectrum is just leave it as a word processor document. And that's still a fantastic step forward. And then all the way at the end of the spectrum where you've achieved maximum efficiency is to incorporate document assembly technology into those gold standards that you have built. So that is all about my rant on document automation, and hopefully it made you think a little bit about how you're putting documents together in your firm. And remember that the objective is simply to get you out of the using old ones to make new ones methodology and move to something better. And as you saw, you don't have to spend a lot of money to get there. And if you want to really take it up to the maximum efficiency, you can definitely get there by incorporating document assembly technology into it. If you have any questions whatsoever, my email and phone number are on the screen, and I am happy to help. Thank you very much.